Uh, Hi, Bridget. Did I say your name correctly? It's Brigette?
SES.
Bridget.
Brigitte.
Okay. So I'm so excited to have you on here to talk about high impact sales, high ticket, high impact sales that also pay it forward. Yes. So one thing that I've been talking about in my community and around being an entrepreneur is this piece around intimacy. So I want to hear from you, sort of like how you conceptualize that, what that means to you.
Yeah, intimacy. To me, it's about letting people in to see the parts of you that you may have a feeling about sharing and allowing people to really have a relationship with you and not get trapped in this kind of one-dimensional lifestyle branding where you present a facade of a certain person and a certain mirage of who you are that really only scratches the surface, which, you know, it's still something that's happening. The trend is shifted into being more authentic, being more vulnerable.
Yeah.
And there's also boundaries, and there's a lot of the thought that you have to bring to how much of yourself do you share? What parts of yourself do you share? Where do you want to let people in to your story, your journey, the deeper why behind the work that you do, which for many of us is tied to something very important, intimate, often traumatic,
That's
really
right.
cataclysmic life experiences where we were in the trenches of something really, really difficult, and then awakened to the reality that we wanted to live a more aligned version of ourselves in the way that we work and what we do for our living, in what we do in service to other humans, right? And so for me, there's just so much complexity around this topic of intimacy. And then beyond just the way you are and how you show up, it is part of everything from the content, the exchange of information, the way you have sales conversations and explore with people, whether or not they want to work with you. I think, you know, the whole foundation of how I think about this is leaning into the discomfort of intimacy and the authenticity of it, because intimacy can feel scary and it's vulnerable, and there's the capacity for rejection and to feel safe to be rejected, right? And all
Yes.
that stuff comes up around marketing and sales.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I always talk about the having a basis of safety and trust within your own body to be able to
Mhm.
hold the possibility that you might get rejected or that people will not like, the flavors of what you're putting out there on the interwebs.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's where I talk about the work has to start internally. Like if you're going to be out there wanting to sell a high impact, high ticket, high intimacy coaching, mentorship, spiritual advising, consulting, service to other humans or other organizations, we have to be willing to have uncomfortable conversations that are really high integrity, where we're holding the space for people to share what they really want and don't want. And in order to avoid being manipulative or coercive, right? That's where we lean into that real intimacy, which again, is not easy. It's not safe and comfortable. And it's not something you do behind a wall. That's why, I mean, to kind of I'm always thinking about the kind of soft side of business and then the strategic side. This is why so often people fail at business, because they want to sell things in a way that's really detached and
Yes.
cold, and they want people to just click and buy or read a series of emails, and that doesn't work very well anymore for lots of reasons. One,
Yeah.
because people are just oversaturated with opportunities, offers, things, and the collective has shifted in our industry and people crave authenticity and intimacy, and they can't get that necessarily just from a couple of emails or social posts. And that's where, I really promote a way of doing business where you are creating experiences and opportunities for people to be in relationship with you, whether that's through an event or a training, or even just over messenger, like leaving voice messages versus just sending cold typed messages, really shifts the flavor and the fabric of this idea of potentially working with someone, exploring through a conversation, right? An
Yes.
email, very different from a DM exchange, typewritten, very different from a warm, real message where the person
Yes.
might listen and not respond, or respond with something deep or complex. And then, what do we do with it?
Yes.
There's this, and I'm really passionate about doing business in a way that's more conscious, more real, more authentic to service. And that's where, again, it's not formulaic, it's not simple. You can't hide behind a sequence and expect everything to just work like magic, right? And
Right.
so we have to create, like you said, the safety first within ourselves to be willing to do those things and trust that not everybody has to like it. It doesn't have to be for everybody. Not everybody has to show up or sign up for the thing. I mean, and stop making it about our worthiness.
Hmm.
I'm tying my own sense of value to how well something is going, and creating stories about my worth versus this is about people and their readiness and if it's for them or not. And I'm not responsible for that.
Yeah.
I'm just responsible for showing up and
Yeah.
sharing.
When you because I think of things somatically, what you're talking about, the way that I'm translating it through my system is, you talk about being behind a wall, that detachment. And so what I'm hearing and metabolizing is like having your heart behind a wall,
Mhm,
right? Because it's like the people that you support are people who do want to make an impact on the world because they care.
mhm,
And we're already feeling the pain of the world. We're feeling something needs to change. And we bring our heart into our business. It's part of our business. And then that heart is also part of sales. It's
mhm,
part of like the intimacy and really like connecting with your person and seeing them and feeling them and sensing what are their fears, what are their hesitations, and really meeting them there
mhm,
versus having this be sort of more what typically business has been sort of portrayed to be from this
mhm,
a
mhm.
masculine, right,
Yep, very
perspective.
transactional and
Yes.
just, yeah,
Yeah,
formulaic. And first you say this and then they say that, right?
exactly. Instead of really just meeting them and connecting with them, allowing yourself to be felt and to feel the other person. And that's, for me, an embodied experience. You have to be able to open your heart
Yeah,
up and sort of like have this energy exchange between you
right.
and your customer, entre comillas, right?
Yeah, and then a lot of it comes up around sales when, you know, somatically or energetically, we're in a place of fear or
Yes.
anxiety about making the sale and, whether or not the person's going to say yes. And we bring so much of that energy to the conversation
Yeah.
that it actually can put the other person into fight or flight or a state of anxiousness where they're not able to sink in and sit with you and be like, actually, do I really want to work with this person? Does this feel good? And I
Yeah.
remember, when I first started out doing sales calls, because I used to do in person events, and most of the time it was a very intimate, warm human connection. My
Yes.
business started before COVID. And I used to host workshops and walk around and put my hand on people's shoulders and sit next to them and look into their eyes and partner people and coach them to do a peer exchange or do a role play. And it was very real and very embodied in the moment
Yeah.
with human beings in a
Yes.
space. And that's who I am. Like, I've always loved experiential learning. For me, we don't learn in our head with looking at an idea or copying something from a slide or from the board and then repeating it, right?
Yeah.
I've been an educator for, oh God, I'm going to give away my age, 30 some odd years. I've been an educator in some capacity in a very hands-on way. And what most coaches and mentors fail to understand is how humans learn best. We don't learn best from listening and reading. We learn best through tactile, kinesthetic, experiential activities that allow us to bring wisdom in through our body, through touching it, through moving through it, through actually working through it. And then again, it's another one of those things where that's often where we encounter the discomfort.
Yes.
And so when we transition to this like fully online way of doing business now because of COVID and everyone's had to be online, everything is workshops on Zoom, sales calls on Zoom, conversations on Zoom, right? You can go back to that space of hiding on Zoom, and you
Yes.
don't have that same felt experience of being in a space with a person
Yeah.
and perceiving their energy. And so that's one of the things that I've really had to lean into is, relearning how to engage with people in that deep felt way over Zoom,
Yes.
which is a bit of a task in
Yeah.
truth, to really bring that experience. And then sales conversations, to take them out of this kind of scripted formulaic thing, because when you're on Zoom, it starts to feel, I mean, when you're with a person in person, the conversation takes a completely different shape
Yes.
when you can see their body language and pick up on nuances. When you're on Zoom, it's very easy to lose so many dimensions in the prism of what's happening, right? And so,
Yeah.
I had to unlearn, relearn, and then practice, because I was taught ways of doing sales that are all about a script, and this is how you structure the conversation. And yes, there is a need to have some structure to sales conversations. I'm not going to suggest otherwise, because otherwise it can also be really confusing to people. But there's just so much of a need to just meet the person where they are, as you said, and really lean in to understand what is going on with them. What do they really need? What do they really
Mhm.
want? And to show up with extreme curiosity and to release the need to sell. And I mean,
Yes.
going back to where I started, so often we get on a sales call to sell something versus getting on a sales call to truly explore and
Yeah.
experience the energetic vibe of like, oh, this could be my client. I could be their coach. How do I actually allow this person to see what it might be like to work together? And there's nuance there too, because I also have clients that go the opposite direction. There is no structure. They simply show up and hold space and do therapy, and they coach the person and give them a ton of advice, and then the whole thing just bleeds out into an hour, and then they're like, okay, well, let's go, and we'll talk another time. And then again, the confusion, like, wait,
Yeah.
what's
What
actually
just happened?
happening? So there's this duality in sales where you want it to be feminine, you want to be receptive, you want to be curious, you want to explore, you don't want to come with a hammer of
Yeah.
coercion, manipulation, but you also need to bring some masculine energy and some structure and some clarity of like, we're also having a conversation where we're exploring whether or not you'd like to invest to work with me to get a specific set of outcomes. And mostly people come to me either in the land of too much structure and it's just too hard, or
Yeah.
they're in the land of it's all just nebulous and wishy-washy and there's no structure to it. And I find that there's a very beautiful sweet spot in between,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
you can lead people on a call where you actually give them a structured way for them to figure out, like, what do I really need? What is the main problem I have? What is it that I've tried that hasn't worked? Do I
Mm.
understand your approach and how you could help me? They should know a lot before they get to the call. If not, then you're going to need to help them and remind them
To get them
and
there.
get them there, which you shouldn't be doing too much of that, right? That's where your sales calls could be problematic. If you're trying to do everything on a sales call,
Yeah.
people should come to the call, and you're just literally having an exploration of like, knowing what you know of my approach, the challenges you're experiencing, what you really want, the transformation you're seeking, the change you're seeking. Are we a fit? Is my approach? And then that's where
Mhm.
you have to have clarity around your approach.
Yes.
And it can't be this nebulous, like, I'm going to hold you in a sacred space to transform your trauma. Oh my. Okay. I'm going to hold you in a sacred space Does that mean you're going to do Reiki? Are you going to do rainbow clearing? Are you going to do chakra? Are you doing the spiral? Are you working with me for 6 weeks, 12 weeks, 19? Like what are you doing with me, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of
Yeah.
those things where we it's again about intimacy, like letting people into your process and explaining it fully. I
Mhm.
think there's all these reasons why we don't do it, like, oh, it's too much, it's demasiado, or no one's going to care, or it's going to overwhelm people. No, actually, people feel really safe and grounded when they can see the full picture and understand all of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And ideally, again, you shouldn't be doing that on a sales call, because that's part of the
Yeah.
problem. You shouldn't, they should have all that clarity, and that's where you're
Beforehand.
showing up and really opening up the veil, showing people this is the way I do the work that I do,
Yeah.
you know and
The-
it requires letting go of some of the fucks you have, for like, oh, some people are going to think that shit is crazy. That's just, well, then those are not your people.
yeah. And as I'm hearing you talk, I'm thinking so much about like, relationship courtship, right? As people are, as people are coming into your field and into your body of work and what you do, they should know a little bit about how you operate and what you're about. And then you come into a deeper, you sort of take a step into the relationship, and you talk about consent-based sales, right? And so it's like in this process of intimacy and sharing, there is an agreement that happens in order to take the relationship deeper. Like if you want to
Yep.
take it, from friendship to lover, you're going to have a consent-based conversation, you know? And so I'm just thinking
Absolutely.
about the parallel there of share a little bit more about consent-based sales, because I think that's something that is
Yeah.
really up in my field.
Hmm.
And in terms of thinking about doing business with integrity and intimacy, consent needs to be part of it.
Yeah, and this is again being open and putting it out there before you go too far, right? Like you said, in a
Yes.
relationship, so many people are like, oh, just check out my free thing, or book a check me out call, or a try me on call and see if you like my work. They want to sell you into their offer. That's not clear, right? So for me, consent-based sales is a journey, and everybody is clear on where they are in the journey and what comes next, because you're giving people a preview into the next step by letting them
Mhm.
know in advance. I'm all about 100% candid, real conversations with your people through your content, through your events, right? So I'll give you a very specific example of consent in how
Yeah.
I teach how to have a sales flow at your event. When I start my workshop event, I will literally tell people up front, today's workshop is going to be a couple of different things. First, I'm going to tell you about who I am and my background and my story. Is that okay? Do I have your permission to share some intimate parts of who I am? Great. I'm also going to tell you the full framework of how I work with people to get their sales in flow. I'm going to break down the whole thing exactly as you would experience it if you were in one of my coaching programs. I'm going to tell you every single piece of my sales flow framework on this workshop today. Now, obviously, I cannot teach and take you through everything that I do in a 4-hour workshop, but I'm going to do the two most powerful transformational exercises that I think are going to give you a really big shift and a jump start on this methodology that I teach. And so I'm going to break those things down. And then about halfway through this workshop, I'm going to actually explain to you how you can work with me if you want to do the full program with the full framework. Do I have your consent to share my program with you during today's workshop? Literally, during my events, I have had people chat at me. I have never been to an event like this. This is
Wow.
incredible. Like, everybody knows what it is, what it's about. They know that it's not all just a setup for a pitch. They also know that I'm going to tell them what it's like to work with me and invite them to if they want to.
Yes.
This is where, when you get past the really bad ways that we've been taught how to do business, and you just get explicit and clear, and then I will say to people, I'm going to give you an opportunity to share your challenges with me in the chat. I'm also going to give you a Google Doc where you can actually write out the challenge or your need, and I will try to answer it during today's workshop. If I can't, I'll follow up with you. Do I have your permission to follow up with you after today's workshop to see if the tools and the strategies and the mindset work that we did today has actually helped you make a shift or make some progress around your challenge? And so I'm, again, preview,
Yes.
clarity. This is the next step.
Yes.
Same
Yes.
thing when I post free content, right? So this is another tangible example. So that's an event example.
Yeah.
Some people might be saying, well, I don't do those kinds of events, Brigette. Da igual. All right. You post content. First of all, your content has to be explicit. Again, this is how I can help you. So many people post stories that are wonderful, but there's actually no solution in the story. It's missing.
Yeah.
I teach
Yeah.
a method called story solution. You have to teach a solution in the story that shows people. One of the biggest challenges that I come across as a trauma-informed coaching mentor is that people don't teach consent, or they don't teach how to get safety in the body when they're working with a client as a coach, right? And
Yeah.
one of the ways that I help, and it very explicit. And then if you want to learn more about my specific method to teaching this trauma-informed approach to coaching so that your clients can feel safe, it's very clear.
Yeah.
Then I can invite you to my free workshop recording that I have, or my ebook where I will break this down in more detail. Comment if you'd like to receive it. Okay, this is where everything goes south because there's not clarity, there's not follow-up, right? So when people comment and say, oh, this is awesome, I totally want that, right? May I message you to give you the information? Consent. Now, most people will just send the link and that's it. And they'll forget about it and that's the end of it, right? That's not the methodology I teach. It's far more intimate than that.
Yeah.
So if someone wants something from that I've offered them for free, that's as the next step, I will message them and say, thank you for permission to message you. I would love to enroll you in my free course and get you that free source. May I have your email and text you the link to that resource? I will email you and I will text it to you because it can go to spam. I will never spam you. And if you'd like, I can text you only once a quarter when I'm hosting a free event. Would you like that? Again, clarity, specificity, asking for permission. People write back, yes, thank you for asking. I do want your ebook. Yes, please tell me when you're going to host a live workshop. Wonderful. I'm going to get you the ebook. I'm going to put you in my system to message you about my event. I message them about my event. They are going to come to my event. May I follow up with you after my event to see what your experience was and to receive feedback, as well as to see if what I did with you at the event was supportive? I mean, when I tell you that this is like the secret thing that I teach my clients that is game changing, like I have literally had people start my course where I teach this.
Yeah.
Start shifting the way they DM people and have closed sales within a matter of a week because they're actually having conversations. And then I'm going to give you the next pearl of wisdom here with sales. After you ask them how it went for them, you ask them, are you still stuck? Have you fully transformed from what I gave you for free, from the workshop you shared with me, and you gave me consent to talk with you after? During the workshop, you shared with me that you were still really stuck around this. Are you still stuck? Are you open to telling me? Oh, and then the response will be like, yeah, you know, Brigette, actually, I am still stuck. I haven't really resolved the challenge fully. Okay. Do you want to tell me a little bit more about it? Do you want to tell me a little bit more about it? If you do, please feel free to leave me a voice memo.
Yeah.
Invitation, clarity, consent.
Yes.
And then that might turn into a voice memo exchange, or they'll say, you know, I do actually really think I need your help. Okay. I still don't book a sales call. Well, do you know about my approach and my programs? Do you have a sense of the price point to work with me? Because I don't want to waste their time, my time. I want to have clarity, consent,
That's
and
great.
respect. Oh, actually, I don't. Okay, great. Well, let me give you a little bit more information first. This is all counter to all the bullshit we've ever been told. Just get people on a sales
Absolutely.
call. Don't give
Mm-hmm.
everything away. Don't tell them the price. No, 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 no.
Yeah.
Tell people everything. Give away every single part of your method. Explain everything. Be 1000% transparent about your core values, how you work with people, the solution, how it's worked for some people, how it's worked for other people. Give a description of a range of experiences. Be honest. Like, I don't tell everybody, oh, if you sign up to work with me in my 60-day VIP intensive, I can guarantee you're going to reach 10K in sales. That's the most ridiculous shit ever. You can't say that. But when I have a conversation with people, I will say, I've worked with different clients at different levels during this 60-day intensive. Depending on where you're starting, I will evaluate where you are with your audience size, how many people are booking calls, your offer, and your sales process. And then I will give you a range of how we can take you to the next level and how much time I think it will take for you to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And then based on what they tell me, I'll say, okay, for where you are, I have had clients go from making 2K sales to around 4 to 6K. And it's varied. Some people within the first month, some people 2, and some people it's after we finish working together that they reach the goal.
Yeah.
And so again, really like at this point, it's like there is no mystery. And
Yeah.
this is where, again, we've been taught this thing about like allure and mystique and mystery and mirage, and it's manipulative,
Yeah.
it's coercive, it's glimmer marketing, and it gets people to buy into an illusion of something that could give them a miracle or a magic bullet or a massive transformation without being 100% real and authentic. And a lot of people make big investments that can not only cost them time and money and not result in getting an outcome, but that can actually cause them harm. I mean, this
Yes.
is the thing that like the why. Why does Brigette
Yes.
give a shit about all this? Why is Brigette obsessed with being so honest and authentic and showing the whole picture and being so nuanced, explaining? I'm going to tell you something. I could probably sell a lot more being a lot less nuanced about explaining this shit. Why is that not going to work for me? Because I'm going to wind up working with clients that are not going to get a great result and I'm just going to take their money, or they're going to be nightmare clients. This is actually really good for you and your boundaries too. Because if you
Yes.
have a client that doesn't understand the way you do the work and the work that's involved on their part, and what is the nuance of the journey and the spectrum of how it can go, they're going to
Yes.
come in with a very superficial idea of what to expect and how you're going to cure them and the magic wand bullet solution, the magic bullet solutions,
Yeah.
and they may not get a good result,
Yeah. They
or
have to
they
be
may
ready.
be a very codependent client, like fix me. Like, wait, no, that's not how that works. This is not how coaching can, like, it's not part of my role. I'm not a musician. I can't just wave my wand. Like, you have to come to the table willing to do these things. And again, that doesn't sell initially as well. But
Yeah.
over time, the more explicit you are, the more in integrity you are with revealing everything, the bigger level of investment you can offer people to make to work with you, because it's
Mhm.
such a clear, high integrity, high impact container.
Yes. Yes.
And you can earn more for your work. You will become a go-to, credible, highly respected person in your industry that people won't even think twice to refer people to. You'll be seen as a thought leader without having to say you're a thought leader, and it will pay off over time.
Yeah.
But there's two different ways to grow a business. There's the McDonald's way, and
Right.
then there's the slow food movement way. And
Yes.
I am a slow food business movement builder. I am
Yes.
about putting in the laying down the foundation of the trust, of the integrity, not to make quick, fast sales now. Yeah, you can make big, fast sales in integrity. I'm not trying to say you can't, but a lot of the bullshit that people talk about, the quantum leap, the making all the big cash, it's shady shit. It's like people without an explicitly defined program process, selling something at a very high price point to all kinds of people at different levels for whom it may or may not be the right fit. And they bring in a lot of money, and then they post the big brags and the big wins. And
Yeah.
it's super problematic. And so
Yeah.
I'm here to suggest that you can build a highly profitable business. You can charge really well for your work, being honest and being authentic and being real, and that you will ultimately have a more sustainable, long-term, well-respected business that will continue to grow and
Yes.
that won't be cut short with you getting burnt out from the approach that doesn't work, and then B, the loss of credibility because you're working with all kinds of clients and the results are going to be all over the place,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. This
a
is
lot of
this is
complexity to
so this
this.
is so valuable. And even thinking again, I'm thinking about it sort of from a relational perspective in terms of like, yes, you can have sex with lots of people, but it takes time to build relationships. And a lot of people, a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs don't want to take that time because it is more labor intensive. But in doing so, in investing in relationship and really taking that time, the sort of it's playing the long game, as you say. And there is something about it is culture change that you are enacting through the way that you do business, right? We're moving from a model of taking, right? Like, I want your money, so let's have a right, let's have an exchange. You give me this and I give you that, right?
Yeah.
Transactional, but also a little bit of the, I need something from you, I need your money, so I'm going to say these things,
Right.
and right
Yes.
into really a more the relational space of like, this is what the priority is. The priority is relating. It is
Yeah.
relating to your audience. It is relating to like the whole process of making a sale. So that in itself is a whole culture shift. And we
Yeah.
can create, your business is called Embrace Change. It is about culture change through the way that you do business.
Well, quick insight into that. Embrace Change was my brand where I started 6 years ago now. And I was initially a life coach, helping folks who had experienced sudden traumatic loss of a loved one through death, a job, or
Got it.
just a big unforeseen life change. And it morphed into business coaching because I was teaching business at UC Berkeley. I was a business mentor in my classroom for
Yeah.
years. And 90% of what people wanted when they came to me for the life coaching came through in that they were dissatisfied with their career, or they had been doing things that
Ah,
were misaligned. And I wound up coaching them into and through the earlier stages of building their businesses and being entrepreneurs. So my brand will be shifting within the year from Embrace
mm,
Change to a more disruptive, no bullshit business brand name,
yes,
to give a little
yes.
insight into that.
Woo!
But around the bullshit piece, a lot of what we don't realize is how much neuro-linguistic programming and neuromarketing. Good friend of mine, African-American man from UC Berkeley, who's brilliant at marketing, taught my students about neuro branding and how it's used in commercials and how it gets people into a state of heightened desire and desire and possibility of a lifestyle, a glimmer, something that they can have. And 90% of those 7-figure coaches that we drool after that make big money are using these neuro-linguistic psychographic
Yes.
neuromarketing techniques on us. And they're not selling slow, sustainable transformation that you can continue beyond working with them. They're
Mhm.
selling, get into my energy and I will help you quantum leap. And I'm the person to get you there, and I'm going to up
Yeah.
level you. And when you get into my mastermind and get into my vibe and into my spiritual container, we're going to go so deep and so big and so far. And then it becomes, and if you stay in my energy and you stay in this container, we're going to continue to make these big leaps. And my good friend Melissa Lapides talks about this really well. I got to give her a shout out. She talks about this kind of pushing and triggering people on their trauma responses of desire and getting them into this heightened state of possibility that they're going to be healed and fixed and cured and
Yeah.
everything's going to work out perfectly, and that the coach is the magician that's going to help you fix it all in a very short timeline,
Yeah.
right? And that's not how change happens, right? Those of us that are real coaches, truly trauma informed, people who have studied and understand the change curve and how humans move through
Yes.
releasing old ways of being and doing that actually requires grieving and backsliding and going through a whole cycle. And there's a
Absolutely.
spiral of change, and right, there's an onion there, and there's layers, and you make progress, and then you go back to old ways, and then you learn to recognize patterns and you learn to shift them, but it's a whole journey. And
Yeah.
again, that doesn't sound as sexy and doesn't sell as well as come into my energetic magical container and I'm going to quantum leap you into 5D awareness, fully healed trauma, a 7-figure business overnight, right? And then you're like, yes, I want that. Here's all my money. And then you will have those short-term wins because you're in that pressurized container of like, go, do, get the thing, make the shift, right? And you may experience those things. And then you're out and it's like, what did that coach or that mentor or that healer actually invest in that experience in a way that helped you internalize and learn
Yes.
and embody the tools that you can then use on your own? Because I'll tell you that I put people out of my coaching containers with the idea that I don't want you to always need me.
Right.
Nothing
Right.
lights me up more than when people inbox me 3 months after they finish working with me and they're like, I'm still using the tools and I just closed a huge sale. And it's not this like, oh, I pushed them so hard during my coaching program, they had to make the 12K sale. 2 months later, I've been embodying your method, Brigette. I've been sticking with it. I've been consistent. I made the 12K sale and I had to inbox you because you're a huge reason why I made it. I know it didn't happen in the program, but I know that what I did with you is a big reason why this happened. And I just want to say thanks. To me, that's more exciting than me pushing someone at a time where they're stressed and overwhelmed, or there's a lot that they're internalizing and learning to like, let's make this sale right now in this program. I'm going to push you so hard. And it's not going to be sustainable after this because you're going
Right.
to get
Right.
burnt out, right?
There's a big energy drop. There's a big
Yeah.
energy drop. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, there's so much of this that goes on in the coaching industry. And that's why I'm here for building the slow awareness around this and having these difficult conversations that often people don't want to have. They don't want to hear this because it deflates the idea that there's all these magic pills out there that we just have to spend a lot of
Yes.
money and in a short period of time the whole thing is fixed, right?
Right.
and
Right.
and then and then on the flip side, there are great coaches and there are great mentors out there doing things differently and who are more trauma informed, who are more informed around human personal development and change in a way that's culturally competent as well, which we
Yes.
haven't talked about,
Yes.
which is a person of relative financial privilege that, not suggesting they haven't had hardships or difficulties in their life, but perhaps doesn't have the level of stored generational trauma in their body in the same way that someone who comes from a culture that was colonized or
Yeah.
enslaved and
Yeah.
had their physical, material, personal wealth and land and human beings destroyed,
Right.
stolen, right?
Right.
There's a very different level of support and shift and integrity that you bring to working with people who come from internalized intergenerational trauma around money and land and wealth being stolen than when you're working with people of relative privilege
Yeah.
who may not have grown up rich, but it's certainly not the same as growing up being the grandchild of someone who literally could not own their own land or who tried to own land and had it stolen and burned, thus decimating that family's generational wealth well into
Yeah.
the future, right? And
Exactly.
so, there's this level of nuance also that has to be brought to the conversation around sales and what we're selling and who we're selling it to and the integrity we bring when we say, oh, I have a program and it's for everybody and it's inclusive and I want diversity. Diversity for the sake of just having visually colorful representation in your program to say that you have a diverse program is very different than creating a safer, relatively safer, more inclusive, more informed space for people who come from very diverse lived experiences around money, wealth creation, healing, all the things, right? And again, so this is a whole other conversation of nuance, of integrity. And it's okay to not be, I mean, I work with a lot of really conscious, beautifully spiritual white women who I really enjoy supporting because they're so mindful of, do I yet in my journey as an ally or as a co-conspirator to communities of color, am I quite yet in a place to say my sexual embodiment program is for all women? These are the levels of nuanced conversation that my clients are having with me. Like, how do I know that I'm ready or that I should be doing that? And often the conversation is like, you can't, if you're a white cisgendered person of privilege, which I look like, but I happen to be, Puerto Rican, half Puerto Rican, and I hold some different ancestral identities that are not what I look like on the outside. And even still, because of the identity I hold in the world as a cisgendered, able-bodied, white-skinned woman who appears white, I can't guarantee that I am always the ideal person to hold that space for people who come from very different lived experiences. I can only be available for feedback, continue to do my work, to learn, to do better. And in an ideal world, which is what I typically do, bring in other experts who are individuals of those cultural backgrounds or ethnic backgrounds to share their wisdom and their approach to bring a truly nuanced a toolbox to my community, right? So, I've always brought in Black, Indigenous, people of color who are trauma-informed, embodiment, somatic coaches who have extensive expertise around how trauma is stored in the body and how to work with it, And so a lot of times white women will say, well, I really want to have women or program with all women. Okay, who do you want? I want to have queer women, trans women and Black women and women of color from all, and that's wonderful. And how do you work with those women? And have you done work with those women in ways that are not harmful? Have you have enough feedback? Well, no. Okay, well, then you're going to need to hire a trans or queer or Black or Indigenous woman to come in and co-facilitate your space.
Right. That's the integrity. That's integrity again, right? Knowing your limitations. Knowing your limitations and where you are in your own journey of self-exploration, uncolonizing, anti-racism. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And if you're like, well, Brigette, that's a whole mess of stuff, I don't even know where to begin, or that sounds complicated. It is. And I can help you on the intersection of all those things with sales and marketing, but you're going to need to hire like a Trudy LeBron or a Louisa Duran or a Maisha Hill.
Yeah, exactly.
You're going to have to hire a person or an Andrea Moon or a Tanya Rodriguez. You're going to have to hire a Black, Indigenous person of color as a coach or as a mentor, either to yourself or to your community, to ensure that you can adequately deliver on your promise, that you can create this fabulous transformation for anybody, right? And that's where, this is where in marketing, being honest about your core values is also a thing that creates intimacy and safety. People say, don't ever talk about politics in business. It's going to put your business down. No, you need to talk about politics. You need to talk about your values. You cannot say, I am a business coach for everyone, and say, you can be a Trump supporter or not a Trump supporter, and I'm going to be a great business coach for you either way. No, you can't. No, you can't. Because if you're a Trump supporter, your approach to doing business is put the money first, and it doesn't care. The ethics don't matter. And if you think that Trump is like a big, good businessman, that his way of doing business is like bigly awesome in the world, you're not going to be a good client for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because my entire way of doing business is 360 degrees from that approach. To thinking about doing business, right?
Absolutely.
So it's not necessarily about politics this is where people get
It's
confused.
about
It's about
value. It's about core
values,
values.
core values,
Absolutely.
and
Yes.
ethics, right? So if
Yes.
you say, I care about Black lives, and my community upholds a commitment to Black lives, and then you let people into your coaching community who say Blue Lives Matter, or All Lives Matter, or BLM is a terrorist movement, you're not committed to Black lives.
Yeah.
Because if you
Exactly.
bring Black people into your community and tell them that you're creating a safe space for them and you allow these other people in, you have failed.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the conversation in this industry that not that many people want to have.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Brigette, I'm so grateful that you came on here today and sat with me. I want to invite you back on another podcast to talk about high ticket, high impact, and paying it forward, creating impact models, because I think that, a whole other conversation is about like people not charging enough for their services and then using the money and creating with money. So that's another conversation for another day. But I want to ask you to share with the listeners, how can people find you? How can people, how can people follow you and learn more about your work?
I am on Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram. On Facebook, it's just my name, Brigette Iarusso-Soto. And I have a business group called No BS Business Advice. And it's a group on Facebook where I share a lot of live training, a lot of value. And I do a lot of free events and workshops. So if you want to get into my free course through my website and get notified about any upcoming challenge or workshop, you can go to embracechange.us. And right there on the homepage, you can enter into my how to grow an online business with integrity. And in
Yeah.
there's a training on how to build an equity-centered social impact business model so you can charge high ticket and not shut out or exclude people who don't have access to that level of capital to afford your high ticket. So you can charge people of privilege high ticket, and you can create enough wealth that you can have sponsorship, or you can invest in other programs or other communities and sponsor people outside of your business model. And you have a lot of options and opportunities and freedom to create a greater level of equitable social impact when you're charging enough for your work, because the nonprofit model is not sustainable, and it
Yeah.
actually often departs from a place of saviorhood and
Yes. Yes.
overgiving and undercharging, which is something that we need to disrupt. So that would be the next conversation that we're going to have, is how to stop undercharging for your services,
Yeah.
so that you actually have the freedom to reinvest resources in ways that are truly regenerative and restorative and reparative if
Yes.
communities with less access is a concern for you. Because otherwise you're not a business, you're a nonprofit. And I was in the nonprofit sector for 15 years, and it's a lot of work.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. And I love, yes, love that we're ending here and that there's a thread into the next conversation. Thank you so much for being here, Brigette. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Isha. I love
Yeah.
this time and space with you.
Yes.